everyone, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, the show where every episode I talk to writers, editors, occasionally agents, maybe others from the publishing game, to learn a little bit more about them and their work and that magical thing that we do that drives us all crazy and wonder why we do this stuff for a living. I'm your host, Rich Eisen. Of late, I feel compelled to remind people I am not the Rich Eisen on the NFL Network. It's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody recently who, about halfway in, I realized that he thought he was talking to that guy. So sorry about that. But all I can say is we are both roguishly handsome bald guys. But I'm the original because I'm older than him. So anyway, on with the show, which is available on both YouTube and via all of the major podcast platforms. So wherever you get your pods, you should be able to find us. And if you're on YouTube, you get to watch us as well. You can subscribe to either show, so you never miss a thing. I, of course, would prefer you did that. That'd be awesome if you did that. I'm going to hit you up later and try to remind you, please leave a nice review. It helps people find the show, that kind of thing. But I'll come back to that because I really want to get into this week's show. My guest today, Mary Keliioka, she's the author of two notable mystery series, the PI Kelly Pruett mysteries, which features the title Protagonist, and the Misty Pines series, which features Sheriff Jax Turner. I always like to talk to writers who author multiple series because it's hard enough to do one. And when you're trying to do multiple ones, I'm always impressed by that. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But Mary also has a brand new book out. Her first domestic thriller is called Don't Ask, Don't Follow. And it features a new lead character, the paralegal, Beth Ralston. Some of the reviews have been very good. The book's been called a pulse-pounding read about truth, justice, and the unexpected secrets families keep. And boy, don't we all know that one. I'm reading it right now, and so far I have to agree. It's really a fast-paced, a fun read. So, Mary, welcome to the Open Mic. Thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the new book, Don't Ask, Don't Follow. For those folks who aren't reading it right now like I am, tell us all about it.
Yeah, so it is my very first standalone, first domestic suspense thriller. I was able to borrow from my previous life. It's set, the story is set in a law firm, and I spent 18 years in a law firm. So it's a place I know well. And then this particular story, it's Beth and Lindsay Ralston. And Beth is the little sister. She's the paralegal. Lindsay is an investigative reporter. And she's also supposed to be Beth's plus one for the holiday office party. And the law firm where Beth works happens to be their father's law firm. So she's been there for a while, but she's worked her way up. But Lindsay doesn't show, and Beth is done with the social scene. So she heads back to her office to get her stuff and head out. And lo and behold, Lindsay is running out the back door at a very fast clip. And she cannot seem to catch up with her. And her sister's on the elevator and has disappeared. When Beth comes back, she finds that her own boss has been murdered. And when she gets back to her office, she's got a note from Lindsay that says, don't ask and don't follow. Now, Beth has heard don't ask her entire life. She's the little sister. But don't follow, it gets whipped out when Lindsay is doing something she shouldn't be doing. And soon the detectives are inside Beth's office, and she has to decide if she's going to cover for her sister or not. And that's where the fun begins.
Well, right off the bat, I mean, legal thrillers are there's quite a few legal thrillers out there. I mean, I think we all know of the Grishams and the, on and on, but you don't really see a paralegal or a legal secretary be the hero that often. So right away, that struck me as something that's a little unique in this genre. And as you noted, you spent a lot of years as in the legal world yourself. Tell me a little bit about what the thought process was for creating this character and maybe why you didn't just have her be a lawyer.
Yeah, well, I wanted her to have, I guess number one is because I know paralegal, right? That's the position I oftentimes worked. And so going into being a lawyer, I didn't want it to be about courtroom drama or or to have that accessibility to lots of information. Paralegal, you're a step down from that. You're not always privy to everything. And so I just wanted her to be kind of that more everyday type of person, that support staff person that has to step up and really think on her own and come up and do some workarounds to get the information she needs. So,
yeah,
also, I was going to say a little less ethically required too on a few issues. We'll say that.
Well, I like that too. I mean, that's something else. I mean, we all like a good protagonist who is not completely bound by the, the things that so many times out in the real world we are bound by, right? I mean, as a reporter myself, I was a regular, attendees of the show know I'm a reporter by trade, and so yes, I often see stories where reporters do things where I'm like, no way in the world would we ever do anything like that, But as in the story, you want them to do that. Get the information, right? Do what you got to do. So that's great. Now, I had a lawyer friend one time tell me that one of the most critical tools for a writer or for a good lawyer is to be a good writer. His exact words were, if you're a good enough writer, you don't have to go to court very often. And I've never forgot that because I thought that's really interesting. Did you, during your career, find most lawyers to be good writers?
I think so, yeah, because, they're doing briefs, and I mean, a lot of it is you're swaying the judge to lean your direction, right? Whether it's a motion to dismiss or just to compel your side. So absolutely, I did find lawyers in general were pretty good writers.
Yeah, many, many years ago, I got to cover a case at the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. And because my home office at that time was in D.C. And so I can't remember if it's when we were living there or because I used to have to go to D.C. all the time. But I remember feeling so completely like a fish out of water the first time I was there. And watching the spectacle of it all was so different than anything, whatever my preconceived notions were about being in that space. The reality of it all just completely overwhelmed it, right? It was so different. And the thing there that was the most interesting to me was that these cases are only 30 minutes, right? Each hour there's 2 cases. And that is because the lawyers have already submitted reams upon reams upon reams of briefs. And so the justices have already seen everything. This is only the final bit that the lawyers get to argue. And it's very pointed. It's like, almost like a star chamber with the way I was there when Clarence Thomas actually uttered words in the court. I was there. I saw him. I heard him. The whole room gasped. But that's one of the reasons I was interested about the writing thing. Did any of your other colleagues ever start writing books of their own too?
Not lawyers that I knew. Another secretary paralegal who I worked with, and she and I wrote our very first book together. So, I mean, I think the support staff, I've seen a few authors, but nobody I knew in the lawyer world has written a book.
Interesting. So you mentioned the first novel. I want to ask you about Derailed, which I believe was the first in the Kelly Pruett series, correct?
It is, yeah.
I understand that the backstory on that is pretty interesting. That was a process. Can you tell me a little bit more about the process behind that book?
Yeah. So I actually started writing when I was 27, and I wrote my first book with my colleague, or my coworker, and so that was book 1, very practice novel, didn't go anywhere. Wrote 2 more books, very practice novels. They're in a drawer somewhere, actually probably in that closet right behind me. Yeah. And then in 1999, I started drafting what would become Derailed. And I drafted it out. But at the same time, my husband and I were also thinking about opening a company. And so I finished my draft and I set it aside, and we opened a company in 2000. And for the next 15 years, I was consumed with self-employment, employees, all the fun stuff. And I turned 50. around 2016, and I decided I wanted to get back and start writing again. So I pulled that book because I thought I had not edited it. So I just want to check it, see if I like it anymore. And I was like, this isn't half bad. So I entered it into Pitch Wars, and it won mentorship with Kelly Garrett. And so I mentored with her. It took me a while to get an agent from that. I had over 100 rejections on it. I finally got an agent in 2017, got a 3-book deal, and debuted with Derailed in 2020. So it was a, overnight success to get that book out on only 2 decades.
Right. I
And
remember a great quote one time I read about Bob Seger. It was supposed to have been sometime in the late 70s, how, someone had called him an overnight success. And he said, yeah, well, they weren't on the road with me, across the Midwest in 1964. It's only taken me, 15 years to be an overnight success. So,
Exactly.
Well, and, we hear this a lot. We hear writers talk about the triple digit badge of honor, in terms of rejections. That's disheartening to anybody. I mean, I don't care how strong you are. And we always talk about you need to be persistent, all those things, but to just keep getting rejection after rejection after rejection would be taxing to anybody. Maybe tell me a little bit about that too. I mean, how did that affect you? Did you ever get to a point where you said, well, this isn't going to work. I'm going to either start something else, or I'm going to go back to, not writing for fun?
Well, no, it was very disheartening on several occasions, but there were some really great agents that offered up some advice. They'd give me some critique, and I would dive back into the book, and I would see what resonated and then adapt the changes. And then I would go out again fresh. And actually, some of those rejections, I did actually say, I've done a heavy revision on the book. Would you be willing to look again? Actually, the agent that signed me gave me feedback and ended up signing me based on the revision that I had done on the book. So, I think it's really important to be open to feedback. I mean, obviously, you can't take every little bit of criticism and jump to make a change. But if it resonates and you can really see what they're talking about, the very first draft of Derailed, I could see there was a cause and effect problem. I hadn't learned that in my previous drafts. I hadn't really mastered cause and effect. And once I did that in Derailed, I was able to get the agent and then get the book deal. So I think it's really important to just be a student all the time and be learning. And I really believed in Kelly Pruett. I loved this character. I've spent so much time with her, I was not going to give up on her. And so I just kept trying to make her better. And it worked out. It worked out for me on it.
I'm always fascinated by that too, because I know for me in my own writing, plotting is just torture. It's absolute torture. Again, regular listeners know the beneficiary of my struggles with writing plot are my dogs, because then they get, an 8-mile walk while I'm trying to noodle out stuff. But I love writing characters. Man, that's just the best part for me. So I'm always curious for you, what is the best and the worst part? Not worst, but the hardest part for you in your writing process? Is it characters? Is it plot? Is it equal shares of each? How does that work out for you?
Character is easy I'm like that with you, the same as you. I love character development. I love dialogue. I like putting two people into a room and just letting them, especially husband and wife. I get told I have really realistic conversations. 35 years of marriage is paid off, I think. I've got that down. But plotting, right, is that it's like, okay, so I've done this. Now what? Now what do they need to go do? And I'm a pantser, so I don't really know what they're going to always be doing until I set them in the room and then figure out the next practical thing that would be leading them to their next step. So plotting for sure is definitely what keeps me up at night.
Well, I just spilled the beans on myself. For me, the way I work with that, I got to take my dog. We're kind of semi-rural, so I'm able to take my dogs for these long hikes where I can just get away from everything. And, so the thing that saves me, because the rest of my life I'm getting bombarded with information constantly all the time. how do you do it when you get stuck on a plot point or even a character plot, just point, but just, when you get stuck, how do you get yourself unstuck?
Well, like you, I live in the country, so I do long walks. I heat up my coffee at least 10 times when I'm working on a scene because, I write a few things and then I jump up, heat up the coffee and I'm thinking and I come back and I start typing again. But sprints really help me when I'm completely stuck. I will set a timer for 15 minutes and just start typing in a scene. And sometimes it's just like, I have no idea where this scene is going. I've got this. And then pretty soon, all of a sudden, my brain will just start kicking in. And then the timer will go off. I'll go back and I'll read it. And there's some nuggets in there. I'm like, oh, okay. I think that might be the fix. So getting out of my way, the sprint allows me to stop thinking and just let my subconscious kind of send it out onto the page. I know some writers like to write. I am a typer all the way, so I type fast. And so it keeps up with my brain. and so that's how I do it.
I'm fascinated by that a little bit too, because, I think one of the hardest things for new writers to learn, or anybody from the time you're in grade school to whatever, is, we call it killing our darlings, but it's really true. I mean, one of the hallmarks of a professional writer or an accomplished writer is being able to edit your own work. I recently had Eric Beetner. He's been on the show a few times now, but Eric's a really great suspense and crime fiction writer. But he was the first person that I'd ever talked to who said, yeah, not only do I edit as I go, I really edit as I go. So when I'm done with a first draft, I mean, as he put it, he categorically rejected the idea that a first draft is always terrible. And, it's usually a brain dump. And then you start writing your actual book. He said, no, when I'm done with my first draft, it is far closer to the final version than it is to something like that. And I thought, wow, okay, now that's an interesting take, because so many writers I know, and none of them have ever said that to me. Now, I understand you like to edit as you go, but are you that intense with how you edit, where you have a pretty clean draft by the time you get done?
I do. Yeah. So I'm afraid there's a part of me that doesn't want to get to the end and have a million things to do. So I rework my work as I go. So I'm with Eric. I mean, when I get to the end, it's more like a fourth or fifth draft, really. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of different things like taking a scene into a different place. It's really going to be about taking the words down and maybe adding a red herring and maybe having to go back into another chapter to plant it here. It's more that type of editing. But yeah, I'm with him. I do not like to get to the end. I am not one of those people that can just dump it out onto the page and not go back and read it. If I dump it on the page, I'm going to go read it and I'm going to finesse it and it's going to be smooth before I move on to the next chapter.
Yeah, I actually agree with that too, because I edit as I go too. Now, again, that's because, again, I'm a reporter by trade, so I have to I have to do a lot of that because I don't have that many chances to go back and redo it. So I got to do it right closer to the first time. But also, I find when I write out a lot of crap, it gets stuck in the wheels, right? And it's just better if I get rid of it quicker than if it lingers, right? Then it becomes part of the story. And then I'm trying to work away, well, how do I work around and keep that and make that work? As opposed to just get rid of it. It doesn't work, right? Take that bit out that does work and use that and move on, right? That's the thing I think I've discovered the later I go in doing this. Bear with me 1 second here. So we were talking, I guess, about Kelly Pruett earlier, and you mentioned how much you love that character. And I'm always fascinated by this. What is it that you love the most about this character? Why did that character resonate with you so much? And then maybe what is some of that thinking that went into, the new character, when you started writing the new series?
Yeah. Well, I think what I loved about Kelly, I wrote her when I was 35. And so Kelly's in her 30s. And so I really related to her about when I created her, I think. She was a single mom to a deaf daughter. And she had issues with family. And not that I was married at the time, but so it wasn't biographical or anything, but just I love that dynamic of family and what family can look like. And so I just really loved her. And then I thought she had such a potential for growth. And I love a character that's going to grow, right? You know, kind of where they need to go and you know where they're starting. And so I just really enjoyed that journey with her. And so I think that's why I really liked her. Now, and then of course, I put a male character in the middle. That was the Jax Turner series, right? I decided to just throw it all out and go for the guys as a main character, which was a total, 180. But then I came back to Beth, and she's just a different. I think I relate to her because she's such a conservative in the legal field, and I think she's a very fun character. Again, has a lot of growth potential because she's a workaholic that needs to to get out of that, that mode. And this case will definitely help her move on from a few things. So,
right. Well, you mentioned the family, and I've noticed the kind of a commonality in a lot of the books. So, I think the new one's your 7th book, right? So I want to say, and I guess in most of the previous 6, that those relationships are very complex and sometimes very difficult. And I was hoping, you could talk a little bit about how that became a feature in your writing.
Yeah, well, I think that you said the right word, complex, right? Complexities, family is just wrought with them. And I mean, it defines who the characters are. It defines who we are, is where we came from. And so when you're working on backstory, of course, you're creating all these different worlds for these people. And I just find that just so interesting when you can give them so many obstacles to overcome. And because it's become who they are, it becomes an obstacle in themselves to overcome over time and to grow from. So yeah, I think I just find it very interesting. And they always say you're working through your stuff. Well, I had a very complex family. So, maybe I'm just working through my stuff and through my characters. I'm not sure, but I just love it. And I just seeing what makes people tick. It's just, yeah, it's fun.
Well, what I find is interesting too, a lot of times, we pigeonhole stuff so much in publishing, right? And it seems to me a lot of times if you have a character who's got a very complex family dynamic, and especially if it's a woman, publishers, agents, sometimes they really want to pigeonhole that into make it different, a different genre than you were thinking, right? They don't see it as thriller suspense now. They want to categorize it as women's fiction or something else. Did you ever run into any of that where, there was any question about what genre you were writing in?
I didn't. I always made sure that the mystery still sits at the forefront of the book, so I haven't had that come up. But I can see where I do character-driven novels, especially, and because of that, I did actually have a critique recently, or a review that said it read Don't Ask, Don't Follow had a lot of women fiction thought because of the relationship between the sisters, but there is clearly a body and there's clearly a hunt for the sister who's not answering her phone, so I do try to keep it, I like that mystery puzzle, that thriller aspect of it.
Right. What do you think has been the most important lesson that you've learned during from your path to publication throughout this process as you've grown and evolved as an author?
The lesson that I've learned? Oh gosh. Well, you have to kill your darlings. You can't be so tied to your story that you're not willing to make it better. I think that I've always been open to that. Maybe it's because I was the youngest of 4. I always was getting told what to do. And, and there's a part of you that resists that. But then there's also a part that you start to listening and like, oh yeah, I could see that's a better way. So I'm always open to critique, always open to improvement. I'm a student of my writing, a student of life. I'm always wanting to improve. I think that that's something I've learned to get better at and to be open to. That said, I don't jump on every little thing. I give myself 24 hours if I hear something I don't want to hear to process the information and see if it's true for me or if it resonates. So, I've met writers who sometimes when they write a book, they're like, this is the best book and I'm not going to change it. And And I'm like, okay, well, and that's great. But if you want to be traditionally published and stuff, sometimes you have to be open to change and you have to pick your lane and decide what you want to do. Probably rambled on a little bit on that one, but.
But, I think it's legit. I mean, I think, I've asked a lot of writers about what they feel like maybe they've learned was the most important thing or the biggest lesson. And, perseverance is, I think, is always going to be at the top of the list, because this is, anything that's creative, everybody has an opinion, right? And sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not good. And you really have to develop a very, very thick skin if you're going to do anything creative, whether it's painting, writing, singing, dancing, whatever. Which brings me to reviews. Now, like I said, most of the reviews I've read on your work have been pretty good. But I'm curious, do you read reviews? And if you do, and you read one that isn't good, how do you handle that? Do you have a process for how you deal with reviews?
Well, I'm going to say I'm a glutton for punishment, because, some people say, do not read your reviews. I respect those people that they have that kind of self-control, because I don't have that kind of self-control at all. I tend to read my reviews. I think sometimes you can garner some great information from them, and that you can put into the next book that you're going to write. Obviously, you can't fix what you've written, but, and sometimes I do take it personally. I used to take it a lot more personally. And for some reason, I don't do that too often. I think I had a 1-star review once, and I looked at it and I thought, and then I looked at the reason and I was like, well, that's not even a valid reason. Like, if you're really going to dislike the book, have a really good reason for disliking the book. That wasn't a valid reason. So I can justify it. And at the end of the day, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm still going to do what I do, and I love what I do. I love writing, and nobody gets to take that away from me, no matter what their opinion is. So.
Well, I love that. I absolutely love that. And it is so true. I mean, again, that goes back, I guess, to the perseverance thing, but everybody does have an opinion. I've told this story before. There's a really good writer in Atlanta that I know. She's been on the show before. In fact, I think she's in my book. But you're talking about when she first got started, she was in a critique group in the Atlanta area with several people who had fairly good careers going already. And one of them was a guy who was very critical of her work. And because he was more successful, she really was taking all this in until at some point she realized, well, I'm not even writing my book anymore. I'm writing a book trying to please him. And it made her angry, which I love, right? Because she felt she had to get angry enough to tell him, leave me alone, kind of a thing. Well, she's the one that ended up with the nice 2-book contract with a really big, renowned agent at I think it was Doubleday or Penguin. I mean, she did really well. So I really have a lot of admiration for this. At some point, you have to take what's valuable and discard the rest.
Exactly.
So kudos to you for that. So I first met you. You were doing speed, the author Speed Dating at Left Coast Crime in Bellevue earlier this year, and I really find those enjoyable because I often discover authors whose work I was not previously attuned to. So, including yourself. So, what else do you do to market yourself? Because I talk to so many writers. I talk about being discoverable. That is the thing in this day and age. Unless you're already a very big name, the publishers, even the traditional publishers, don't have a lot of money to promote your stuff. So you end up doing a lot of it. What kind of process do you employ to market yourself and to become more discoverable?
Well, I try to stay active on social media for sure. And I do hire publicists when I'm releasing a book. I think that helps for me, to help me get onto different things or write articles or podcasts and stuff. But, I stay local. I stay close to my local bookstores. Nobody sells more books for you really than a bookstore owner that loves your books and, hand sells them out. And so I really do try to stay connected to all of that. But it is a struggle. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that because I'm still looking to, find a way too as well. It's a very crowded and like a noisy room, right? How do you get heard? And there's a lot of great writers out there. So I just try to be myself, and just have a good time with it. And like I said, stay on social media. And yeah,
Are there any particular platforms you like more than others?
I like Instagram, but I'm a Facebook girl. Maybe it's just my generation. I'm not sure, but I do like Facebook. But mostly because it connects me with friends that I've known for, since I was 12. And it's like, oh, hey, now we're friends again. So I like Facebook probably is my favorite. Instagram would be my second, because I like the pictures and the imagery of it.
Yeah.
So.
I just had an author on who was saying that somebody on TikTok picked up her book and read a review or gave a review, but did it on TikTok, and it kind of blew up. It really helped sales, and others picked up on it too and started doing reviews on the book. And it wasn't anything she did at all. It was somebody found her book and
organic.
Like, wow, that's fabulous. Yeah, that's the best, right? I have a friend who's a nonfiction author, writes sports biographies, and he's done quite well. It's had one made into a HBO TV series, and he's done quite well with them. But even now, after all these years of success, he was at Sports Illustrated for years and on, right? All this success, he still does things like he'll take a book, he'll sign it, and he'll go to Dodger Stadium and he'll leave it under a seat and look for somebody to find. A little note that says, if you found this book, whatever, kudos to you or whatever. Or he'll leave it in hotel rooms, or he'll leave it at an airport or whatever, right? He does this. And it's just like, man, you don't need to do that, man. You've been on the New York Times bestseller, so it's like 6 times. And he's like, yeah, but, there's no guarantee for the 7th, so I keep doing it. I admire that drive to never let your guard down, right? To always be pushing it a little bit. Is that how you feel too? Like, man, every time out, it feels like the first time where I've really got to show my best thing, and I got to always be out there doing that?
I'm probably not like that at all. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature. So I get accused of, I'm like, I just want to write my books. I don't really want to be out marketing. I don't really enjoy it as much. I think that the idea, though, I have to tell you, the book under the seat, what a thrill for the person who finds it, though, especially if you're a New York Times bestseller author. I mean, that's going to get him so far just in people talking about, hey, look what book I found. And it's got a handwritten note by this author. That's pretty cool. I might adapt that. That's
I'd say his best one. And he showed pictures to prove it. He was at an airport, and he snuck into one of the airport bookstores, and his book wasn't there. So he had a copy of it, a signed copy, and he snuck it onto a bookshelf there within the sports books. And whoever, I don't know, I'm sure whoever got the book, if they decided to go up to pay for it, realized, the bookstore, like, this isn't one of our books. I would love to have seen the look on the seller's face, right? And anyway, pretty soon he's going to have a wanted poster at the airport. It's like, if you see this man, go check your bookshelf.
Yeah. The selling of myself is really hard. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think authors in general, we find it hard to sell ourselves. But I keep always going back to the question of why I write. And I write to tell stories. I love to tell stories. If you get me in a room to just talk story, I can talk for hours about, creation and all of that. But if you want to buy my book, awesome, I'm not going to ask you probably to buy my book. I'm just like, yeah, I'd rather talk to you about other life events and stuff. I'm like, that's just who I am.
Well, again, regular listeners of this show know I've talked about this all the time. It drives me nuts when that's all authors do is ask you to buy their book. Yeah. It drives me crazy, especially on social media. I would much rather do your methodology, just connecting with people, and having people become a fan that way. And then I think my thing is, I know when I connect with an author in some way, I'll buy all their books. Mm. But if someone's just pounding me over the head to buy their book, I'm never going to buy a single book, right?
It's not real. I like real connection. I like people. I'd much rather do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you? As you noted, the new book is standalone. Do you have something already in the works? What's next for you?
Yeah, so I keep getting asked to write a sequel to this, so I'm not sure if I will or not. But that's kind of in my thought process. But right now, the third book in the Misty Pines mystery series will be out next year, September 2025. So I have half of that drafted right now, and that's my summer writing project, is to finish that up. And my agent is out shopping another domestic suspense, so fingers crossed we'll get something on that. And other than that, just we're going to start a new project in October. Already starting to make notes on it. So another domestic thriller. So
fabulous. Well, maybe you've found a new sweet spot. Sounds like you've got a new path to follow there. That's great.
Yeah.
I always like to end the show on a fun note. I hope it's a fun note. I mean for it to be a fun note. Let us just say I am the omnipotent being that can put you together with one of the following three people. And there's a theme. I usually have a theme. You'll probably figure out the theme fairly quickly, but which of these three folks would you choose to spend some time with if I could make that happen? And the options I'm going to give you are Tom Selleck, Angela Lansbury, or Stephanie Zimbalist. One of those three. And then like I said, you'll probably figure out the theme pretty quickly, but there is a theme.
I thought you were going to tell me like Harlan Coben or somebody. Like Angela Lansbury, probably. She reminds me of my grandma. And I think we'd have fun just chatting.
But, she's so accomplished. But, of course, the reason she's on this list is because she played Jessica Fletcher.
Yeah.
For anyone who maybe didn't catch it, Tom Selleck was Magnum PI. And Stephanie Zimbalist was on not Moonlighting, Remington Steele. All of them were private detectives, private investigators. They all played private investigators. So that was our theme. I'm sure everyone picked up on that pretty quickly. So, Mary, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about writing with fellow writers, folks who understand. I'm in the angst portion of the world right now. My agent's got my latest thing out there, and getting feedback, some of it good. No, most of the feedback's good, but no one's bought it yet. So we're still in that process. So I know you probably relate. So good luck to you though with the new projects and your agent out there shopping another domestic thriller, which sounds great.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, folks, I said I was going to circle back, and I am now. So I'm going to ask you, if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe, leave a review. Better yet, tell somebody about the show. Just tell even one friend. That's really a more sustainable way. I don't make any money off this. I don't try to monetize this. This is just something I do because I really love to talk to writers about writing and about publishing. It's a great passion of mine. And if you know somebody who's interested in writing, maybe wants to take the plunge themselves, hey, what better way to learn about what that world is like than listening to the good folks who come on the show, talk all about their work and how they do what they do. So please be kind and share. That would be great. And you could still leave a review. That'd be great too. I love getting comments from people on YouTube and on the pod platform. So that's great. Anyway, for my guest, Mary Keliioka. Did I say it right? I knew I was going to screw it up here.
Keliikoa.
Keliikoa. That's the standing thing in this world, is I'm going to screw up the name sooner or later. I apologize for that. For myself, though, for Rich Eisen, I am going to leave it the same thing I always leave with, which is tomorrow's not promised to any of us. So please, whatever you do, make today count. And until then, we'll see you next time.